Hanging with Higgins, where author and former prosecutor John J. Higgins interviews his intriguing guests about their lives, knowledge, experiences, and projects. Explore, learn, and be entertained. Come, join us now. Good evening. I'm John Higgins and host of Hanging with Higgins. I'm here this evening with another good friend of mine, Lois Mancuso, who is president of Whisper Productions, Inc. I've known Lois over 30 years now, and we have done a number of projects together, some with statewide and even national importance. Most recently, we have been working on a project known to the world as the Kangaroo Crew, to assist toddlers and beginning readers how to be prepared to and to actually begin reading through the use of entertaining cartoon characters and fun-filled games. Good evening, Lois. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on to the show. How are you this evening?
Fine, John. Nice to see you.
Same here. So, I'd like you to tell the audience a little bit about your background and how you became interested in the educational field.
Well, I started off teaching in New York City schools, both in public schools and private schools. I taught mostly in the New York City high schools, but I also have a licensed kindergarten through 12th grade, which is not uncommon in New York City. And from there, we raised a family and had 4 sons. And, of course, they were very interested much more in playing ice hockey and guitar than they were in school. So I decided that I would take a special interest in encouraging them in the academic world.
Okay. And did you always want to be a teacher? Is that one of your goals growing up?
Yes, probably as a small child, I can remember playing with dolls and pretending that I was the teacher and teaching them to read and to as though we were in school. It would be a pretend world.
Right. Well, I've always thought that teaching had like a special calling for certain people. Not everybody can teach, so there's usually a reason that somebody would want to go into that field.
Well, I think, too, that you're inspired by educators. Early on, I had some very excellent ones and people who were inspiring me to continue in following what they were doing.
Uh-huh. So in your education, you said you went back to get an advanced degree?
I did, because after we had the sons, as I mentioned, they had some academic challenges, and I decided that I would see what we could do to encourage them. So I was always interested in why people learn and how they learn in different ways. And at that time, Seton Hall was very much in advance. They began programs for what they called the learning consultant. And there what you would do is kind of explore how people learn how to learn. And I was fortunate enough to be in one of the beginning programs that they offered. And it was very, very interesting and challenging, and certainly, brought you to a different level of understanding.
Well, I know in the course of, some of the stuff we've done together, you always talked about different modalities on how people learn. Is that where you learned that?
Exactly. What there was an emphasis on what they called multisensory learning. And so that what people should do, and most people do naturally, is use every bit of the senses that they have. They look, they use their ears, the auditory, the visual, and kinesthetic, so that they can bring in more material and work with it in an effective manner.
And those techniques, they're used a lot of times where somebody has dyslexia in that, because I know you've done a lot of work with that as well.
Yes, because curiously enough, what you do is you look for the people's learning strengths and you really improve on those and take advantage of them. And if there are weaknesses, then you work on bringing those up to par and to try and give them additional strategies so that they're able to work more effectively.
Right. So, that's the good news for people who have, learning disabilities today as opposed to 100 years ago.
Exactly. What they were very good at years ago were telling you that this youngster has a problem. But what they did not really understand is what do you do about it and how can you effectively remediate it. Now there's been huge improvements.
Right. So I know at one point you even talked about societies like the Orton Society, which help in that regard as
Yes,
well.
yes. And what it is it became a tremendous emphasis not only on sight vocabulary, but also on the phonetic approach, which has gained a tremendous amount of support, and because it really does give you great results. And what it does involve is very skilled teachers.
Right. Because I think I was taught phonetically when I was in Catholic school.
Indeed,
I didn't know that the
so was
public
I.
schools did that so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing
And
was we paid
go
a
ahead.
lot of attention to cursive writing and to writing in general, whereas nowadays, I guess, especially with the digital world, people are much more interested in print rather than cursive. I think New York City has even said that it perhaps is no longer going to require cursive writing, which is amazing.
Well, which is lucky for me. I remember when I was in 5th grade, the teachers were sending home notes that he has chicken scratch. I can't read my own handwriting after a few weeks, so I guess thank God for the digital world.
Well, I kind of wonder, though, how will people be able to write their name, as far as identifying themselves? So I guess that'll change also.
Yeah. Well, so much changes so rapidly today.
Yes.
Now, I want to move on a little bit. At some point, you became an advisor to the New Jersey governor and the Governor's Committee on Children, which is where I met you.
Yes, remember, that was many years ago. And the state of New Jersey was very, I think, forward-looking and really considering the needs of children, especially children who were in a distressed situation, to try and work with them to better their situation and enhance their lives.
Yes. Well, education was really important to that governor. That was Tom Kean.
Exactly.
And I remember in his administration, they actually had increased the salaries for teachers to attract, better people and more people to teaching.
Yes.
Which is so contrary to what's going on now.
I know. And I think one thing they did was open up the world of academics to people with experience who did not necessarily have all the exact academic qualifications, but they gave them a chance to, so to speak, catch up so that they were able to be qualified within the classroom.
Right. And then the other issue that I was staff, so we were working on I was like staff to a number of the subcommittees, and one of them was the one on substance abuse, which I think you ended up on eventually. I don't know if you started on there or not. But you had come to the committee with a really great idea. Can you tell us a little bit about the MTV stuff?
Well, I think MTV was just starting at that time, and at that time our 4 sons were in middle school and high school, and there was a great concern about substance abuse among all the parents. And the children were, at that time, listening very attentively to this new MTV world. And I thought, well, let's get these people to give positive messages to the youngsters. And we began to approach them. And thanks to your support and the support of that committee, they were very forward-looking by, first of all, even considering having that done, because at this time, public service announcements were not very common. So that we were able to take advantage of that and approach different pop stars to have them make positive statements to youngsters.
That's correct. And we had a number of adventures doing that, didn't we?
Oh, my goodness, yes. I do remember that writing to and trying to contact through your connections different of the celebrities to see whether or not it would be appropriate for them to participate in this. And when we did get a response, it was the first one was a singer who was named Phil Collins, a British star, and he agreed to do it, but we had to get to California to film him, and we were able to come up with whatever was necessary to actually do it, in spite of, against all odds, so to speak.
That was very true. We were assembling a film crew as we were on the red eye, flying across the country, because we didn't have anybody in place when we got to California, San Francisco actually, to do that. And we were working with Vicki Bippard at the time.
That's right. At MIT as a studying film, and she was very skilled in her field, but she had come in late to the project, but she certainly held her own and did a fine job. And then when we got there, I remember there was all kinds of problems as far as unions were concerned. So we had to deal with that, and we had to deal with timing, and we had to deal with transportation. But somehow Phil Collins was very gracious and was very willing to cooperate. And also, I believe it was Mike Rutherford who was singing with him, and he also participated. And it was quite an accomplishment we felt for New Jersey.
Well, and I remember, at least I've told other people this, because the film crew that we had, we shot on film because I don't think video was really up to par yet. So I don't know, it was 35, I guess it was 35 millimeter we must have shot on.
That's
but
right.
The film crew that we assembled actually had worked on Star Wars, the movies.
Yes.
And I remember having the sound people, when we were, because we filmed them in between the sound checks before the show, that we were in one of the back rooms of the Oakland Coliseum with that hum.
Yes.
We're stuffing blankets
yes.
into the air conditioning ducts,
yes.
and all of that, and it was really quite an adventure.
Yes, but they're so professional. They knew exactly what to do. I remember the lead cameraman saying that he had filmed Black Beauty. I mean, he just, they really knew what they were doing.
And that was really helpful for our first experience in making commercials.
That's right.
Yeah.
And
and then when we had those commercials finally done, we actually went to ABC with them.
Yes, that was
right?
the first place we approached. And I remember going in and speaking with the staff, and they said that typically they did not do this, and we told them quite honestly, typically we did not do this either, but we felt it was very important. And lo and behold, they agreed, and before you know it, they were airing the public service announcements, and they got quite a bit of very positive attention.
Which in some ways was kind of ironic, because we had Phil Collins basically talking about not drinking in our commercials, while at the same time he was doing Michelob commercials on the national airwaves. But of course we were separating the for young people not to be drinking as opposed to everyone. So, because I know that became some kind of controversy in the press at some point after we did the release. And then something else that just dawned on me, I forgot all about the Keystone Wright commercials. I know that when we had come back and had released those commercials, I was approached by somebody in my office that there was a gentleman who was a prisoner in Trenton State Prison dying of AIDS.
Oh, yes.
And he wanted to do anti-drug commercials for us as well. So we assembled another crew, and we went into, actually it was the infirmary at Trenton State Prison to film him.
Was that Rawway?
No, that was Trenton State.
State.
And I was a little surprised they even let us in, because it was only a few days before that they had an escape. So I don't know that you were cognizant of it at the time.
No,
but
I had never been in a prison, and that was really
that's good.
Quite an experience. Yes.
As part of my job, I've been in almost every prison that there was in New Jersey. Luckily, I always had a code to get out, but
yes.
But that was a very sad commercial with that with Mr. Wright when we had filmed him, and he had gotten him from.
Yes, I agree, but it was also very poignant. It was wonderful to see how he really cared enough to try and tell young people to avoid this, and that this was really not the route to go. It was very powerful.
It was, and I think we were the first AIDS commercial that had ever been done.
Yes.
Because I know that there was some controversy about even airing them, because they thought that it was so depressing, what he was talking about. But like you say, it was very poignant and very powerful, because here was an actual guy who had gotten AIDS from using needles.
Yes.
And, I think eventually he was released on medical, for medical reasons. I don't think he lived much long after that, but, he certainly gave, something that was powerful and important at the time.
The other thing I remembered about that is that when we were doing that, do you remember that other prisoners came forward and they wanted to be involved? And then all of a sudden, we had several of them sitting together, and they all wanted to make their comments. And please, they say to the young people, understand that this is really not good. And I still remember that.
Yeah. It's funny, because that was probably, 1987 or so.
Yeah.
So
it's
hard to believe it's that long ago.
Yeah.
But, it was. And then part of my contacts was that I was sent to work with the Reagan White House on anti-drug issues among teenagers, and on the ride from the airport to Williamsburg, they put a whole bunch of us together during the winter when there's nobody else down there. And the one guy I rode with, Eddie, was big in the music business. So he had known all about, what I was trying to do, and, we were trying to contact celebrities, and he had been in the music industry for a long time. And after we filmed these commercials, it wasn't long after that I got a call from him, and he said that he was now managing Frank Zappa, and Frank wanted to do some anti-drug commercials. So I had said to Eddie, I said, I'm not so sure about Frank. I've heard rumors about him doing gross-out contests with Ozzy Osbourne, and so I was a little nervous about it. He had said to me, well, I'll just have Frank call you. And at the time I had a roommate, Hal, who's a good buddy of mine, and he picked up the phone, and sure as it was Frank Zappa on the other end. And I talked to Frank for a few minutes, and then we made arrangements to go meet him at the Beacon Theater in New York City. So we all had dinner with Eddie, and you remember the cab ride over there, Eddie kept turning around in the cab and going to me, "Are you sure you want to bring Lois? Are you sure you want to bring Lois?" I said, "Lois is part of the deal, so she comes with me." And
oh, my goodness.
So we get to this place. It's the Beacon Theater. I'm sure it's much cleaner than what it was back in the day. But we go, and we're going to see part of the show. We're going to meet Frank in the intermission time period. So we go to get in our seats. Well, there's people in our seats. So they've got to move the people so that we get into our seats, and we sit down. And at
John, I think I should interrupt you and say I had no idea who Frank Zappa was. No idea.
So Frank had that half jazz, half rock music stuff going on. He had this black lead singer who sounded a lot like Axl Rose. When I first heard that Guns N' Roses, I thought it was Frank's guy. But anyway, this lead singer's up there dancing around with a microphone, and then he's dancing around with an inflatable doll. And there's a whole bunch of girls' panties that are hung up on the clothesline behind them. I didn't think Frank generated that kind of enthusiasm, but for whatever reason they were there. And I remember you nudging me and going, John, what's the dirty laundry doing up there? And I was like, oh, my God. I'm not going to try to explain that part. And then sitting in the seats, all of a sudden you could smell some marijuana. Somebody in the audience was smoking, and Lois is going, sniffing on, John, something's burning. We got to get out of here. So I said, oh, Lois, it's just pot. Just relax. And then I looked up and I saw him with the sex doll, and I said a private little prayer to God, and I said, oh, God, please don't let her ask me what the sex doll is about. So anyway, we get to intermission, and we go back, and we meet Frank Zappa. And Frank Zappa and you just kind of hit it off. Right?
It was true. It was a very unusual meeting, and we began talking, and it turns out that they had 4 children the same age as our children, and his wife was there, and we met his wife, and we met the family, and everyone began talking, and he was very supportive. He was very gracious. He was certainly very interested in supporting what we were doing. He felt that drug abuse was really child abuse. And he was a strong advocate of anti-drug. He said he did not do this himself, and he did not feel that parents or children should do it and be involved. So he was very willing to meet with us, and he arranged to have us come down to his next venue, which was in Philadelphia, so that we were able to film him with these anti-drug messages. It was quite an occasion.
Yes. And contrary to what the public thought, I mean, the only thing Frank ever did was drank coffee and smoked cigarettes.
That's right.
He was not into anything else. And I remember when we were filming him in the between the sound check and his performance in Philadelphia. Frank, for whatever reason, did not like the Reagan administration at all. he would give us like 15 seconds of really good anti-drug stuff, and then he'd say something about Ronald Reagan. I think it must have taken us, 18 hours in an editing suite
Yes.
to finally get the commercials so they were workable. But, I mean, it was really noble of him to have done those commercials for us, you know.
Really very, very kind. He was very interested. He was an incredible parent, and he just was a very different persona than the one that his public persona. In fact, he as a person was very kind, very, very smart. There was no question about it. And it was a shame that he died at such a young age because he had an awful lot to contribute. It was well before his time.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's about 20 years now, too,
Sure.
I think.
Sure, I think he died 20 years ago.
So when we come back from doing Frank Zappa, I get a call from over at the governor's office, because I think at that point I transitioned over to the Attorney General's office. And they said to me, "We've got Al Lewis over here, and he wants to do an anti-drug commercial." Now, for those of you who don't know who Al Lewis is, Al Lewis was the original grandpa from Grandpa Munsters. So we had met with Hoffman LaRoche at some point, right?
Yes.
And
yep.
And we needed kind of a place to film the commercials that we had kind of scripted for young children, because it was, more of that kind of group that would be watching, Grandpa Munster. And so Hoffman LaRoche were in Nutley at the time. I think they've moved. But down in the basement, they had actually a full recording studio.
First class.
Video.
Absolutely. Top of the line.
It was a wonderful studio. And so we had Grandpa Munster come down, and we filmed 3 commercials with him at the time. Now, we had been hunting, and one of the scripts, there was an explosion that he was going to, come out of. So we went to all kinds of magic shops, I believe. We finally got what was known as a flash pot that would take black powder and explode it. And so we get down in the basement of this studio, and we're beginning to set up, and then Lois and I start talking, and it's like, oh my God, we're in the basement of a pharmaceutical company with all kinds of chemicals. Do we really want to set off a gunpowder explosion in the basement? So needless to say, we decided to use dry ice, which we just had to adapt the script somewhat. But the other thing that was fascinating to me about Al Lewis was how he did the commercials. He wouldn't remember all the words in the text, but he would go, "Hello kids, blah 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 blah," and don't do drugs. And he would do it over and over again until he filled in all the words. And I guess that's the way, he really did all of his, his work. Again, that was another great experience.
Yes, it was. And he also was very gracious. He was very interested in helping. He was very cooperative. He would work with us, because a few times we had to repeat because for whatever reason things didn't go very smoothly. And he was more than willing to just be very patient with us, and he understood what we were trying to do and supported us.
Yes. And then the last set of commercials we did, which just dawned on me again, was in the same place. There was an anti-drug program with a robot, Fubi the robot,
yes.
And the program was called Keeping a Clean Machine. And he would talk about this $1 million machine that kids all had, which was their human body, and that they should not be doing things to their body that would hurt them. But Fubi was kind of funny. The guys who had it were like magicians. They had worked with David Copperfield, I think, so they were very good at illusions. And in doing that, they were big guys too. Somehow they got themselves in that machine in a way that you would never believe a human being would be in there. So you thought it was really the robot talking.
That's right.
And the other funny story I have from that is I had him come up to meet the Attorney General on the 8th floor in our building, and he came up and got in the building. One of the executive detail guards that protect the Attorney General and the governor was ready to shoot it at some point. He didn't know what was going on. But when they left at close to quitting time. So as everybody is trying to get in the elevator, here's this robot talking to them, and they were stuck. Like, do I get in? Do I not get in? And if they got in, of course, they'd be making comments about what was what they had on or whatever, and the people all flipped out. Like, how does this machine have any idea? So that was another fun kind of experience.
They were very clever people.
Yes, very much so. And as part of what we were doing then, we were also doing we had just invented the concept of drug-free school zones, but nobody really knew what a drug-free school zone was. So you would come over to the Attorney General's office to be on the Commission to Deter Criminal Activity and New Jersey Citizens Against Crime, and through that those agencies, we were going to do these massive public awareness campaigns. Right? We raised the money to do that. We
did, and it was involving the drug-free school zone. And I remember that meeting with the people who were the advertising and coming up with a design that replicated the actual drug-free school zone sign that appears on the street for each one of the classrooms. And the print of the actual text of the law was printed behind it so that the teacher could open it up and read it right within the classroom.
Well, I think you and I were designing that sitting in a car outside of, it was Kramer Guitar at the time.
Yeah.
And it was like a party. They were announcing something. I don't know what it was, but John Bon Jovi was there. Les Paul.
Yes, that's right. That's when we met.
Little Stevie.
Yeah.
Then it was that Russian group Gorky Park or whatever.
Yes.
But the funny part of it is Lois and I are sitting in my undercover car, and we're going over how the flap should go or whatever, and the fumes from the car were coming in, and the two of us were getting more and more angry at one another with whatever we were coming up with. So somehow I guess that must be the way some great inventions are made. But with that campaign, we printed 60,000 posters, went to every classroom in the state. 1.5 million student rights cards went to every kid. Another 1.5 million brochures went home to every parent through one of our local real estate companies donated that. Hoffman LaRoche donated the posters. And then we did a second campaign a year or two later that was geared more to really young kids with Officer Bernie.
Yes.
So we had a coloring book from grades K to 3 and then an activity book for grades 4 to 6. So I can give you one funny story about that, in that 2 or 3 years later, the head of the crime prevention police group, whatever their name was, sits down in the office with me, and this Officer Bernie was like a brontosaurus with a long neck, and the cover of the book had this purple dinosaur with this long neck and a cop hat coming out the side window. And he goes to me, "You can't release this." And I go to, "Well, why not?" Because I know it's already been released. And he goes, "No cop would have his head out the window like that. That is giving a very bad impression to the public." And I said to him, "It's a cartoon character." So that was basically our governmental experiences. So I want to go back to your interest in the approaches to learning. It wasn't long after that you started working to implement mentoring programs in the inner city.
Yes, and it was primarily in Newark, which is one of the most economically depressed areas that we have. And what I saw, that the youngsters really face the same challenges that they do in the suburbs in their beginning to read and in school. And one of the things that I was most interested in was to prevent failure. And although there's lots of challenges they have, one thing we can really do is to give them the tools that they need to succeed. And I kind of imagine that suppose every child entered school wanting to learn to read. What could we do to make that possible? And that's how the whole Kangaroo crew began. We came up with cartoon characters who were very lovable, who were very supportive, and we used them in a very simple manner so that they could encourage youngsters to begin to read.
Yes. And I know that you had, when you were working with the mentors and the mentees, because I remember that was a conversation we had, the mentors were showing up, but the mentees really didn't know what to do.
Yeah, they were engaged. But what it was is we were in a situation where there was very low budget, and we had many youngsters who did not have books. They didn't have textbooks, and the only way that you could have the very simple beginning readers was to buy an entire series, which was not going to happen. So we came up, and I began to write these little stories using cartoon characters and with a very controlled vocabulary, and used a multisensory approach so that we could encourage success and start with very, very simple words. It would be simple, but it would be fun at the same time. And then we realized it was even more successful if we turned into games, and we would make different games, and the children would keep score, and they would instantly see their success and really encourage them to continue.
And when we did the Kangaroo Crew, right, that we kind of came up with some of that concept with the idea. We were talking about pouches at the time, weren't we? We're trying to come up with a kit.
So I think, yeah. And that's how we get the idea of using a kangaroo, because first of all, many youngsters don't have parents or adults who sit and read with them. So we thought, wouldn't it be nice to have a cuddly animal that would sit next to them, and to have a pouch so they could keep their pencil or book right with them, with the animal. So that's how we came up with Kangaroo, and the idea was Lulu. So Lulu became Lulu the Kangaroo. And, of course, that rhymes, and our main characters became Ryder the Spider and Regal the Eagle. And the reason we used that again was the rhyme, so that Dr. Seuss, all of these things have proved that children remember things that are in rhyme.
That's right. And then, as you said, with coming up with like the pouch and finding a way to get children to be able to sit and have somebody read with them, we came up with the idea of also having a computer disk with a software program.
Exactly. I became really, I'd have to use the word fascinated with the technology. And I saw that if we could have a program that would be a digital program on a CD that would be game-based, so that the youngster could use the mouse to work on the computer with simple reading games, that would be one thing. That would be the CD. In addition to that, they would have a printed book that would have the identical text. So now you have it not only on the computer, but also in written form, so that the youngsters could follow through with what they've learned on the computer in an actually written form. And that became very successful, in particular with parents who really are uncertain what to do with their youngsters, and also after school programs, because the tutors who come in realize that the youngsters who are having a little difficulty are not incidental learners, so that here you gave them something that was a complete kit. You gave them the CD, and you also gave them the books.
Can you explain what incidental learner means?
It means an incidental learner is a youngster or a person who will pick up the information on their own. You put a 5-year-old in front of a newspaper many, many times, and all of a sudden they'll begin to decode it, actually. And other ones you actually have to show them what it is. Most people you have to show them what it is.
Right.
And then they're fine.
And then we had the kits up on Amazon there for a while.
We did, and we had some success with some local drugstores and also some retail stores, and they became very interested, and that was really a very good experience. But then what happened is different things in our life got in the way. We put it aside, and years later, as the technology advances, suddenly now we have touchscreen, and touchscreen is what we really needed, because then you could get down to basically teaching them the alphabet, which is very, very important. And this gives them the confidence they need to move ahead. And with touchscreen, we could make up very simple games using these characters, and they would have almost immediate success.
Right. Well, because it's hard for a little child to manipulate a mouse.
It's almost impossible, certainly. And if you have a parent who's willing and able to sit there with them, then they don't really need this because they already have the support system. Whereas this, really worked so well. And once we developed this, we turned it into an app. And as you know, the apps are available on all the mobile devices, including the phones. And phones have become very reasonable because now you can buy these mobile phones. I guess that they're restored in places, like Walmart.
Oh, refurbished, yeah.
Very inexpensively. So that what I saw was both in the inner city and in the suburbs, all of the parents seem to have mobile phone devices. And this can be downloaded onto a mobile device so that when they give the youngsters something to do, it's something of value.
Right. And the kids love to play on those things.
They do. They do.
Which is a great thing, something that you never could have foreseen 20-some-odd years ago.
No, and with the idea of touching it, this really made it nice. And in many classrooms, they have now these boards, they call them smart boards, which resemble blackboards, and that the teacher can project it onto that, and the youngsters can begin to manipulate the images themselves. And what's good about that is that if what you do is promote something called collaborative learning, where the youngster will begin to play the game, and for example, they have to identify the A and pick out 3 or 4 A's with their character. And if they're uncertain how to do it, they turn and look to their friend, and before you know it, 2 or 3 of them are working together. And there is nothing like seeing their face when they have no idea and they're looking at you and they're stressed, and all of a sudden they begin to get it, and that smile breaks out. You know that this has made a difference.
Yes. And you've taken, in the process of developing this, you've taken to it a variety of different environments.
I've brought it from the Head Start programs in areas which English is a second language, and have had great success. And curiously, not only with the youngsters, but also the parents have approached me, because many of those parents really do not read English. And when they saw how simple this was, they were very interested in trying it themselves, which really was very encouraging.
Yes. So, I mean, these kind of programs are usable not only for, toddlers who are beginning to read, but as you say, for people who are trying to learn English.
Exactly. And I saw recently an article in the Times about one of the libraries in the Bronx. They have a 2-hour line waiting for people who are trying to learn English, because it's lessons trying to learn English. So there's a need for that in this country, because if you cannot read, you can't do anything. And what we would love children to do is want to learn to read so that you can avoid failure, because you don't want to have to waste time catching up. It would be wonderful if children could go in there, I think I know that. This is something that they're comfortable with.
Well, I think the whole thing is accelerated. I mean, when I went to kindergarten, it was more play than it was anything else.
Yes.
But I think now that it's, they're pushing kids to know, I guess they teach them the alphabet and, all the numbers and all of that kind of thing. Because I guess preschool in many ways does what kindergarten used to do.
Sure, because what it is the youngsters also are with Sesame Street. They an awful lot through Sesame Street. And through these apps and through the different shows, youngsters are very much exposed. But what they actually have to do is learn it themselves. It's a difference between watching it or can they generate the information. Right.
So in developing this app, you've been working on that for quite some time.
Yes, we have. And now we have it on the Android, on any Android. So that it can be purchased through the Google Store, or we have it on the iDevices so that it can come through iTunes. And we've had great success with that. And one of the surprising things, it's been downloaded in Africa, India, and in particular in Asia Pacific. So that's very rewarding to see that people are finding it in different parts of the world.
Yeah. Well, that's the wonderful thing about the Internet. I mean, you've got worldwide distribution.
Yes.
Out of almost out of your house.
Exactly. And there's no reason why any of us shouldn't be learning, whatever it is that we're interested in.
Absolutely. I agree with that.
One of the things I'll mention is that there's this wonderful program called Coursera, where at no cost you can sign on to the Internet and find these wonderful courses. And I took some and learned an awful lot about something called gamification. And then I was able to incorporate the gamification into my app so that it's structured in a way that the youngsters have lots of rewards. They have a scoreboard, and there's lots of stars and bells and whistles, which, believe me, the 3-year-olds think is just wonderful.
Uh-huh.
Actually, we all do. Everybody likes praise.
Yes, that's true. I know that when I saw your husband the last time I was up there, I saw that he had been playing on the game. I wanted to know how fast he got through it. So,
well, it's interesting you mention that because our friend in California emailed me and said that her 9-year-old, although she's very good at reading, has takes the game and just tries to do it as fast as she can to see how quickly she can get through it. So that's really nice to hear.
I think I had put an announcement on Facebook when it first came out a couple of weeks ago, and it says, for people who are learning to read or those who need a refresher course. So, so why don't you tell us a little bit about how the app operates? Because there's like different levels of difficulty in that.
Actually, yes. It's called Lulu's Alphabet Matching Game, which is part of the Kangaroo crew. And Lulu is the main character who is kind of the adult figure. And Lulu has a variety of friends in her crew, and so she has a different character for every letter of the alphabet. So when you first, I would say, initiate the app, you can put in your child or the youngster's name, and it will hold up to 4 youngsters. And then you can have a variety of choices from easy, medium, or hard. Easy introduces the letters as individuals, so that A would have just the letter A that they have to identify. And there are 6 choices, and they're always random and always different varieties. They then as they pick them, they achieve stars for every letter that they get correct. And that's what they kind of like, is to see those stars add up, and then you star, and all of a sudden a cascade of stars appear, and they really like that. And then the second medium level is where you have to identify the initial letter of the alphabet. This is all letter identification. And then there are objects that they see, but they don't have the text of the word. And in the hard version, they have to identify the initial letter of the alphabet, but they must do them in correct order. If you get one wrong, you must start over again. And the reason for that is so that they really pay attention to that initial letter, which we're introducing to them.
Right, so they're just not randomly hitting things.
Exactly.
Right.
And I will tell you the most challenging one to come up with was the letter X. And if you look into the other, like Richard Scarry and the different textbooks that would have, not textbooks, but the children's reading books, you will see in the letter X, they often perhaps even skip it. So we have X-ray fish and X-ray. We would have X-axis. All of which are correct, but the children laugh when they get to that. And
I know working with you, it wasn't only me, it was some of the other people who've been involved. You would only want a certain sound for whatever that letter was.
Yes, it would.
So if it had multiple sounds, it still had to be just the one that you were doing in the first set of words, I guess.
Yes.
So, apple as opposed to acorn or whatever.
Exactly.
So, and it kind of drove everybody crazy.
Yeah. One of the long sounds of the consonants.
Right. So it took a lot of thought.
Yes,
so
it did. And I
really
must say the team that we have working on this is exceptional. They're all very professional, very accomplished in their own right, and completely dedicated to this, so that I think that the product itself, the graphics are so colorful and very compelling. The music is wonderful. The whole setup is very, very professional, and the programmers do a wonderful job.
Yes. It's a really good program. So maybe you could tell us, because I know that with creating all the characters, maybe you could tell us some of the characters that you came up with that are in this app, like Ivan the Iceman.
Yes. Well, first let me tell you, I tried to do as many females as we have males, because I think one of the big things that I'm interested in is not only to promote the young boys, but also the girls to feel good about themselves and to have characters. So well, I will tell you, Ivan the Iceman, all the children like Ivan the Iceman, and they're always looking for him, and they want to see, is he really going to freeze? But their total favorite is the monsters, and anything that Vin the Viking, he's another favorite with his big head gear. And the boys like things that make lots of noise.
Uh-huh.
At the end of the game, I would tell you that that's kind of the reward for playing the game, is that when you finish, all of the characters appear, and as you click on them, they say their name in their own voice. And the children really like that, which is a mixture of stars.
Yes. And we brought in this wonderful voiceover talent who can do any kind of voice. Right? When we first talked to her, she gave us an audition tape that she went from being an infant to a 90-year-old, every stage in between, to being a 90-year-old person.
Yes. And yeah, she's one of the most successful voiceover, Lani, really in the business, in the video game business. So we were very fortunate. She was so cooperative to work with us. And, I think the more people, as they begin to see it, the more it's going to grow.
Yes. It's wonderful to work with great people, that's for sure.
Yes. And I'm happy to say that I received emails from places where we tested it now asking where is it and how can they get it. So we were working in Elizabeth, New Jersey, and we're making a number of flyers, which they've requested, so that people will know how to get the app and how to download it.
Yes. Well, that's also one of the big stages with doing anything on the Internet is getting your stuff known.
Yes.
And that sometimes takes more work, I think, than developing whatever the thing is.
But, of course, the beauty of it is that it's possible now. Whereas before the Internet, it was not possible. Whereas now, it's another world that we've entered.
Well, that brings up the story of when we were doing the initial books and the CD, right, we came up with a 4-foot display, and one of the major department stores in the country took it and they placed it in their store. And what did it take us, 4 hours to find it?
Yes, because there was no communication. They just didn't understand what we were doing at that time. On the same token, they sold over 500 books, so that was nice.
Right. But, some of the stores just have so much stuff in it, particularly back in those days, that it was really hard to get, seen or noticed anywhere.
Yes, yeah.
And then part of the thing that we were doing to try to do that at the time was that we were coming up with a television show.
That's right.
And we had multiple characters, right? We had Lulu, had Regal the Eagle,
yes,
and then Ryder the Spider. And then we had Ryder the Spider. Then we developed a sidekick for him, Tug the Bug,
yes,
which is a lightning bug whose light goes off at oddball times. And then we've developed the bookworms, right? A, E, I, O, and U.
The vowels, exactly.
Yeah, to accommodate the vowels. And, we developed, we have 3 full scripts now.
Yes, it's really a comprehensive program.
Yes.
It just allows itself. I know that there's so many puzzles that we have that we can do in additional apps so that people will have a follow-through. And just a matter of now to expand our marketing on this, and we'll have other things to work with.
Yes. And we're even talking about doing picture books.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Well, your construction book thing.
Exactly, because construction, in particular, little boys are fascinated with large machinery, so that we can certainly do things, again, always related to words, the letter, the alphabet. What you want to do is inspire youngsters and their parents to ask them, even on an everyday basis when you go to the supermarket, and you say to that youngster who's sitting in the carriage in front of you, look for signs that begin with the letter, say, A. And he will count, can you count 10 things or 3 things that begin with the letter A? And it not only keeps them busy, but they actually look for it. And before you know it, they're saying to you, do you want an uppercase A or a lowercase A? And it's just so nice to hear that, because the parent is happy and certainly the youngster is happy.
Well, and that's one of the popular games, right, that you have on the website now is the shopping game.
Yes, that is an all-time hit. And
so why don't you explain a little bit how that game works?
Well, we have Sam the Snail, who's got his shopping cart, and what he does is he has a list, and everything he purchases begins with the letter S. So he is looking for syrup, and when he takes the mouse or his finger and touches the syrup, he can draw it into his shopping bag. and lots of noise, and the cash register rings, and he's happy. And then he's a true American and continues to shop. He will go for salt and soap and other things that are begin with the letter S.
Yes.
And the children really like to play that game.
And when they pull in an incorrect one, what happens?
Actually, we have very little negative sounds, but nothing happens. They just try it again.
Right. It just pops back to where it had been.
It goes back again, and we say, try another.
Uh-huh. It just, uh-huh. You just got to give me a second. I got blasted with a volume change.
Sure.
So, still trying to change that setting. So, what do you think is coming next?
Well, I think one thing before the next, I should say this, is that you have a situation where you want to encourage the youngsters to introduce them to the world of letters and the magic of reading, but you don't want to force them. One thing we wrote in our books is to give lots of praise, start very slowly, and have lots of patience. Because children are children. They're only 3 and 4 years old, and they need lots of encouragement. So, then to follow through on your question, I think the things that are coming is what we would do is advance the levels, because right now we're dealing with preschool, and we're focusing on preschool and very beginning. We want things to be not only very simple, but also lots of fun. And just to continue on higher levels and bring them more complicated stories, and then to have something with writing involved, where they write and can capture their ideas and put it onto the internet.
Yeah, well, I would think in the future it would even be possible for them to help design the game themselves, right?
Absolutely. And there's there's these wonderful websites like Khan Academy where you can actually learn any level of mathematics and coding. Coding is another world. I've become very interested in learning to code, and I would recommend anyone to look into it because it's just like another language. And now actually some universities are accepting it as another language. Instead of a foreign language, they will take coding because it's very powerful.
Well, you've taken a lot of computer programming courses, right?
I have, especially like with game design, and I find it fascinating. And what you're able to do on this internet and through these programs is just to express yourself, and they're so creative, and the people you run into and the young people who are using them are incredibly creative and very, very helpful.
Yes. Well, it's a whole new world.
It is.
Right?
It is, and it's not going to stop here.
Yes. And then when we were developing all of this, we even started working on plush toys, right?
Yes. Well, the plush toys would be in the future. We'd definitely like to have them because, again, many youngsters are sitting with these devices by themselves. And if they could have this toy next to them and believe that the toy that they're seeing on, the image they're seeing on the screen is reflected in the toy, the plush toy, when we have opportunity to bring the plush toy with us to the site where we're testing the program and the youngsters see the plush toy, they get so excited. It's like a celebrity experience. Is this really Lulu? And so this really makes it fun. So I think we're on the right track with that.
Yes. Now, and I think at some point you could probably even put, sound discs in these toys as time goes on.
Yes.
That the character can even talk, in there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the other emphasis I'd like to say is the great success we've had with English in homes where English is a second language. Lots of positive response from that because of the simplicity of it. And what divides us from the other programs, and there are many wonderful programs out there, and whatever it is that helps youngsters, I think is very positive. But ours really encourages the youngsters to come back on their own where they want to do it. And that's when we have a real measure of success.
Yes. Well, wasn't it true in some of the schools the kids wanted their Lulu?
Oh, yes.
You would get calls.
Where can we buy it? Where are we going to be able to buy this? So that was, that's really, really nice. But,
Yes.
In the future, we hope that they will be available.
Well, I think that certainly will happen. So, did you talk at all about the smartboard kind of approach to things in the classroom?
Well, I think what that is touchscreen. And what we're seeing a lot in are the classrooms where they not only have this board, which resembles a blackboard, but also tables. And they have many different names, but these tables are touchscreen tables, so that if you have youngsters who are having difficulties in learning to read and learning different things, they can truly work together. And there's nothing more successful than when a similar aged person works with another. It really is a very big encouragement and is very, very helpful. And that's what these boards encourage and allow to have happen. Was before they'd say, oh, use your own paper, don't look at someone else. No longer. They're all doing it together, and it's really quite interesting.
Yeah, well, that's a great idea. I always had trouble with all the standardized testing kind of approaches to things. That, that isolation piece really is not. It's not the way the real world works.
No.
I mean, back in my day, you couldn't have a calculator for certain classes or whatever, which was just mundane work.
Yes.
If you didn't know your timetables by high school, I mean, you were in a whole other mess.
Yes.
But
yes.
A calculator just made a lot of that stuff quicker and easier.
Mm-hmm.
Without going through the same stuff over and over again.
Yes, and I think too that now people are appreciating that everyone is creative in a different way, and when that can be celebrated rather than something that's negative, I think it makes people feel good about themselves, and it also encourages youngsters to follow what they have their strengths in.
Yes.
Whether it's in art or science or sports, music, everybody's able to do something very nice and very well. And that's what I think should be praised. Not that, we should dismiss the rest. We certainly have to learn the basics, but they always give them credit for what they can do and excel in.
Well, I've always said everybody really has an important part in society. I mean, you could be the biggest, most famous brain surgeon in the world, but if your toilet clogs up, generally they need a plumber.
Exactly.
So the plumber becomes extremely important in that world very quickly.
That's right.
And today so many things require such a much higher level of expertise.
Yes.
To make it work that, we should be celebrating what everybody does, in terms of their own, careers.
Yes, and also like my dream about helping the youngsters to become not only that they would be readers, but also that they would be competent with the technology. Because in the suburbs, these children are growing up with these devices, and it's going to give them such an advantage, so that if we don't have our whole society, we will not have a level playing field.
Right. And that I've done some stuff with the inner city as well, and that, that was one of the problems we had with drug-free school zones back in the day, was that we were locking up so many people because everything was in a drug-free school zone.
Yes.
There was very few spaces that weren't.
Yeah.
And most of the problem with people getting arrested was that, the industry in the inner city today has become more drug distribution than it has. There's no jobs.
That's right.
And, people will need to survive, and, they will find a way to survive.
And the jobs that are available include a real skill with technology.
Right.
And I think this is why I'm mentioning the coding, that if youngsters can start in early on, some of the schools I know in Europe are including coding with youngsters as young as 6 and 8 years old, an introduction, which the Khan Academy does. And I think that's to be praised, because it will really help them to think in a whole other dimension.
Well, believe it or not, we're almost out of time. So
Right.
I would like for you to give, your website information so they know where to look.
All right. It is called Kangaroo Crew, and if you look at www.kangaroocrew.com, and that's Kangaroocrew.com. And I'll repeat it once more, www.kangaroocrew.com. Thank you.
We are out of time, so we are going to say good night.
Thank you. Good night, and thank you, John. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.